Hello, welcome back for part 2 of a complete walkthrough of SPECDRUM. So in the first part we covered a ton of stuff, loading samples, sequence controls, anatomy of the cells, auxiliary settings, slider functions, and we touched on the freeze function, the gate modes, and the scale modes briefly, and then yeah, that was it. So today I'm going to start with well, hopefully we'll get through the last video was 2 hours long, and apologies for that. I didn't mean it to be so long, but there is a lot to go into with SPECDRUM. The other thing is that I did notice that the audio quality on the microphone is not great in parts on the first part. It's because I had a noise gate on the mic and the settings were a bit too aggressive, but it shouldn't cause you too much problems. I did notice it about halfway through the video, and then I ended up sort of just speaking close to the microphone, and so hopefully that should be okay. It took 3.5 hours to export a 2-hour video, and then I didn't think it was bad enough to go back and re-export it. So anyway, so we'll start today off with, it's mainly going to be all macro controls, which is as I said yesterday, is this section here, and also the new preset system, which is in version 1.1, which is I'll be releasing this week, and also and also I'll just cover briefly some MIDI implementation things, but I won't. There's too much to go into in that one. It's probably better to, once you kind of once you're more comfortable with SPECDRUM, like there's a whole kind of side of things that you can explore by yourself. But I will just briefly show you how to actually you can map some of these controls. Some of them will require you to put SPECDRUM inside a instrument rack and map the macro controls, but I'm going to skip that because that's a whole topic in itself. But I will show you also how you can play the cells with the MIDI keyboard, with the sequencer running or not, and you can also, I wanted to show you in the preset system there you can recall presets with MIDI keys as well. So obviously that leads you to the possibility of recording preset recalls by recording MIDI tracks. Anyway, we'll get into that. So I've just put a simple kind of drum set in there just to save a bit of time. So a little bit or hide it, but that's what we're going to be working with for this macro control stuff. So as I said just yesterday, this whole box here is what I call the macro control section, and what that means is that there are kind of buttons and dials and things and switches that are able to affect changes on sort of like multiple cells simultaneously. Most of it's kind of done as you have to excuse me, a bit of a sore throat. Most of it's done as time-saving features, and then other ones. There's some really cool kind of creative uses for these as well, especially performance-driven stuff. But anyway, I'll come to that eventually. So first of all, I'll just go through the macro control section as an overview. So the top row of these buttons, cell select, that basically controls the cell selection. And in the first video, I talked about using the little yellow tick boxes to select cells for certain operations. But here you can, there are some kind of like wider controls for selecting cells en masse. So if you click all, that's fairly obvious. It selects every single cell, and none clears the selection. Inv is invert or inverse. So basically, if you have, so say we've got these 4 cells selected, and you click invert, then those will be cleared, and all the cells that weren't selected previously will be selected. And obviously you can toggle that backwards and forwards. That works on, like, it treats all of the 16 cells as a group. I might change that at some point so that it works on a track by track basis, because that's possibly more useful. But anyway, the feature's there, so we'll turn that off. Then we come down to cell actions. So these play, clear and hold correspond to the green button on the cell, the play button, and the clear is the little X button, which clears the sample from the cell, and the hold is the blue. I think I kept calling it a freeze button yesterday, but it's referred to as hold in the manual, and it's referred to as hold on here. So that's the hold. And obviously none of these, if you click the play button, that toggles the play status of the cells, but obviously these things only work when you've got a cell selected, and that applies to everything in the section actually. So if we wanted to see what that is. Yep. So say we wanted to clear a bunch of cells, so or change the play status and change the freeze. I was doing this yesterday actually on the previous video, but if you sort of, as I'm clicking that the play button, it's toggling the play status of those cells that are selected, and all the other ones are untouched. And same with hold. So so as I'm clicking the hold, obviously it's toggling the whole status of the cells, and the same with clear. I'm not going to do clear because I'm going to have to load the sample back in. If I did that, so, and then below that, so that whole the whole section is to do with kind of operations on whole cells, and then below that we have a section that it deals more with individual sliders of cells, and again, and anything, the universal rule here with the macro controllers, that without a cell selected, they will have no effect. So you always have to have a cell selected to do anything. The parameter select kind of has a couple of different purposes. The most obvious one, I'll just select a couple of these so we can demonstrate. If you wanted to select, turn on the select buttons for sliders in multiple cells, you can kind of do it from here. So first of all, make sure you've got cells selected, then check the parameters on here that you want selected, and then click select. So then you'll see that turns it turns all the switches on to kind of match the switches here in all the selected cells. Any, as I said before, any cells that aren't selected, it doesn't affect them anyway. So in order to undo that, you would just turn those off and then press select again, and then they'll be turned off. There is a reason that you'd want to do that. It may be obvious to you already after I went through the self-modification or modulation slider, because obviously to make this work you have to have the select switches ticked on the sliders that you wanted to affect. So you could like have ranges set in these cells, and you could kind of like turn these on and off from here in multiple cells, and sort of have the self-modulation slider change different parameters. I'll demonstrate that later. The little cross at the side there is just a handy way of clearing selection here. I'll just go, these three little, these are new in 1.1, I think. I've lost track, but some of the features have been there, but I just kind of reorganized this section a little bit, and I added in an extra feature. So the bottom one, it says there on the mouse over, or the side of it will be cut off. That opens the current manual, which is always online at all times. The one above it is to toggle the mouse hints on and off. As I said in the previous video, I've made it so that the hints are off by default now, because I think they're kind of quite intrusive, or they can be if you if you're used to using the interface. So if you need the help, you can turn them on, and when the button is white, they're on, and when it's greyed off, black I should say. The top one is something I added. This came about from implementing the preset system, and especially the ability to kind of recall presets on the fly, because I was seeing a few instances where I guess if you change presets halfway through when a cell was playing, there'd be occasions where it didn't cut off the sample, and especially if you got like combined with like random playback modes. So you could get like some, especially with a long sample, could get stuck on for a while. I did change some of the code, so that should happen much more infrequently. But if you do ever get that, clicking that will kill anything that's currently playing, and then it'll carry on playing. These excuse me. These controls are still to do with so there's a reset thing there. So you had a bunch of stuff set, and then you can sort of say maybe you want to clear the first four, so you would set them in there and then just press reset on there. Reset all of them. That's weird. Oh yeah, I know why that is actually. That's actually not a bug. That's a feature. So I'll do that. The reason that didn't work as intended is because what you'd have to do is if you wanted to clear just these two, you would set those, press select, and obviously that's in all the cells, but you can ignore that. Press select so that the buttons are selected, and then press reset, and then we'll clear them. And the reason it does that is because there's a shortcut feature. I think I went through it on the first video. So to reset any of the cells, there's a few ways you can do it. Sliders. You can double click the select button, which does it. You can also use the slider reset button in the cell. And there's two ways you can use this. Is like you can either click a slide select and then press the button, and it will clear just that selected cell. But there's a shortcut in it which, if none of these are lit up and you press it, it will clear all the sliders. It's just a kind of a time-saving feature, really. So that's that, and that's why when I tried to do it via the macro controls here, it reset all the sliders because none of these were selected in any of the cells. Anyway, you can have a play with that and you'll get the hang of it. Cell defeat, I'll come back to that in a second. The kind of I'll explain what it is and then I'll come back to it because I'll show you an example. Cell defeat, basically you turn that one off, and that basically enables you to perform these kind of operations on cells, kind of irrespective of whether you have any of these slider select buttons selected. I'll show you why later. And then lastly, the modify section has a dial and a button which you use in combination to send values to sliders, and then kind of like random. It's a randomization thing, really. And then there's a macro slider on the right hand side which you can sort of dial in specific ranges and values for certain sliders. The only other thing, I don't know if you can, it's deliberate, but that is above that slider there are two little boxes which you can see them. If I put this into MIDI mapping mode, you can see that they appear, and the reason for that is because these types of sliders are not directly mappable in live, because they're just a standard max object and not a max live object. So the reason I did this is because if you want to map the macro slider to MIDI controls, because you can set a range, you need two controls, once at the low value and once at the high value. But because it's not directly mappable, these two squares represent the kind of upper and the lower mapping control for that slider. I'll show you that in a bit. But I just wanted to point that out. Right, okay. So the top section is fairly straightforward, so I think I'll just concentrate over the rest of the time on this section at the bottom, the parameter stuff. And I'll just begin by, I'll get the track playing. Let's keep the hi-hats on. So remember, I said that obviously none of these have any effects on cells that aren't selected. So the first thing we need to do is select some cells. You can do that either manually or you could do it via the macro controls. And then I'll show you how we would use the macro slider to set a particular slider value for all these selected cells. So first of all, you need to select a parameter. So we're going to pick on the yellow one, which is the filter. It should be fairly obvious with the hi-hats. And then I'm just going to move the slider, and you'll see that actually nothing happens. The reason for that is because ordinarily you need to have the parameter selected in each one of the cells, but to kind of, as a time saving and a convenience feature, this is what cell defeat does. So when you turn cell defeat on, what it's telling SPECDRUM is like when I move the macro fader, or whether if I use the modify kind of dial, is saying ignore any selection buttons that are on or off in the cells themselves, but use this as the reference, the sort of macro parameter select as the mask, if you like, for the thing. So as I said before, with cell defeat off, moving this does nothing. As soon as you turn cell defeat on, and all of a sudden we're getting, so we're able to move the filter slider for all of those. And this behaves exactly the same way as a slider inside the cell, so you can set single values like that, or you can set a range. Or you can reset it. And you can, that works obviously with as many parameters as you wanted to set. So I'll select the first three just for whatever reason. Actually, it'd probably make more sense on the other track. So I'm going to click this to remove the selection on there, and then I'm going to select these ones instead. And then cell defeat's on, so it will ignore the fact that there's no slider selected in any of these cells, and we'll just override that. And then we can set values. Oh, hell, if it wasn't muted. And then you can kind of set a single value if you wanted to. I'll reset. So so that's the slider, fairly straightforward, I think. The only thing is, like, there's no feedback from the sliders themselves to this single slider, so it's always sending absolute values. There's no catch up, if you like. The modify dial sort of sends kind of like randomization to selector sliders. So, but it works in sort of two different modes, and it depends on which way you turn it. So as you can see at the minute, it says rand, which stands for random, which is sending an absolute random value to any sliders that you've got targeted. And if you pull it to the left, it says mod, which is modify. So the difference between the two modes is in random mode, it will send an absolute random value and using the kind of the distance from the middle as the scale of the values. So the closer to the middle, the smaller the value. Obviously that's small, as using the center as the base, and that will send values like plus or minus the center. And then in the modify side, it will sort of like change the existing range or value by a certain random amount that is kind of set by the distance that pointer is from the center. It'd be easier if I just demonstrate it. So I'll just set let's pick one. Let's pick that percussion on the end. Yeah, it's a good one. So I'm just going to turn off the selection for those. You don't have to do that, but so I'm going to set a range for the pitch. And then first of all, I'll set random values first, so absolute values, so that'll just change every time you click it, it's going to change the pitch. You should just be able to see that, moving every time I click it. Just keep your eye on this slider. And you can do that for multiple parameters. You can see all three are changing. But the other way is if you have a range already selected, or and then you turn the dial to the left, and you then hit the button. So as I said, it will make sort of minor modifications to the upper and lower limit of the range every time you click. You can see every time I'm clicking, it's like slightly changing that range. And the more extreme you turn it right the way down, it's making really big changes. And same again, you can do multiple parameters if you want to. And the reason for having it that way is because you can map the dial. You can also map the I kind of think I refer to this as the send button, which, so just turning the dial itself doesn't do anything. You have to actually set the dial and then press the send button. But you can map this to MIDI as well. So obviously that's for like a live situation. You can be kind of just sending random changes via MIDI to cells. I think that's about it for. Oh, the other bit I wanted to show you was this concept of being able to select select sliders from here for things like. A good one would be. So if I set up some retriggering on this, and I don't know if you remember from the first video, I talked about the retrigger mode. So if I set a range on the pitch, so that's retriggering, but it's retriggering at the same pitch all the time, unless you turn on the retrigger mode and then select the cell. So now that's changing the pitch randomly every time this is re-triggered within this cell. Turn the hi-hats back on, it might make a little bit more sense. So you can hear for every the clock is the same on both tracks, but obviously this is playing multiple repeats within the same time frame as this is playing a single sample. So here's where the select comes in. So I'll turn off all these for a second. So we got the cell selected, and then we can come in here, and then you don't have to worry about the cell defeat thing. So what we're going to do is with none of these on, when I press select here, then it will turn off this selection, and then it goes back to just playing a repeat of the same pitch, and then again you can turn it back on or off again, on and off again. So things start to get a bit interesting when you start to do stuff like this. So now we've got some amplitude modulation and some distortion and filtering around the range, and because we've got the retriggering on, we could then turn on all these three slider selects. Hopefully that makes some sense. There's a few other creative ways you can use that. Similar principle applies to the self-modification slider as well. where you can set ranges. If I drag the range, obviously in the self modification, I don't know which way to call it, modification or modulation, I'm not sure. Self modulation slider, but as I said in the first video, that only works on sliders that have the select buttons enabled, so that hasn't got them enabled. But again, we can come here into the macro control selection and select those, and then now the self modulation slider is now affecting these, and you can just then you turn that off again as well. So that's the whole of the macro controls. It's sort of like there's just some weird concepts to kind of understand, but once you do, they're actually very powerful, both as like utility kind of functions to kind of like just kind of clear cells and reset cells and whatever but also but especially in combination with MIDI mapping, there's a ton of like really nice live things you can do. It's like, for example, you could, let's get the whole thing playing. So let's say you wanted to just like low pass filter the whole thing. I'll show you here where I'm going to select all of the cells. Now, even though these are not playing, the using the slider on them will change the sliders in these cells as well. But obviously they're not playing, so it won't have any effect. But I just wanted to show you can sort of quickly select all of them if you want to do that. So say we wanted to sort of low pass filter the whole thing, you could, or something I just did there actually is I turned off the slider select buttons here to allow me to kind of like position the slider where I wanted to start from, because otherwise it would, as long as you've got slider selected here, it will just send values to when you move it. So I'll reset it to the middle, and then I'm going to turn on the filter selection. So as I move this, it will change the filter for like all of the which is something like that. It's very useful to, like when I get into the preset system, obviously you can store that state as a preset then, so you could have a preset but there's basically just like a low pass filtered version of your entire sequence, and then you could kind of you could kind of map this to MIDI and then bring it back into the mix. Yeah, stuff like that. I think that's basically the major functions of the macro section covered. So I'm going to move on to, I'll do MIDI mapping first, or some bits of MIDI mapping, and then we'll come back to other stuff. Other stuff being the version 1.1 preset system, and then that should be a wrap, I think. So MIDI mapping. If you just put live into mapping mode, you'll see that immediately, like, some of these things appear instantly. So any of these buttons, the dial, this button here, these two buttons, and as I said, these two little boxes represent the upper and lower limit of the range of the macro slider. So they're immediately mappable with a keyboard or whatever. So so for example, I'm just going to map. I'll map the reset button to button on. I've got a fader fox controller here, so I've mapped that to that button. So now I've got the reset button on a MIDI control. So say we just do something a bit, just double the speed a bit. Oops. So what I want to do is just do something a bit chaotic, really. So I've selected most of the things, and I'm going to set a big random value, and then don't forget that unless you have any of these individually selected, you need to turn cell defeat on, so it ignores any of the selections in here and just use this as a mask. And then I can just keep clicking. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll map the modify button to another MIDI key, and then so I'll click that MIDI key. So I've got reset on one and the random button on either. So now as I play this, I've got these cells selected. I've got all of these sliders selected. Now I can just keep hitting the button on the MIDI controller to randomize all these cells. Obviously the results are sometimes unpredictable. And you can also just change the dial, turn the dial the other way and have it to just like modify these into random ranges. So as you press it, then and if you quite rightly think that that's nonsense, the reset button is mapped to another MIDI button. So I just press that, and then we go back to where we were. So you may think, well, randomizing all of it is too much. So what we'll do instead is I'll turn off the selection for those. All we'll do is we'll randomize the steps 2 and 3, cells 2 and 4 on that track, and then we'll randomize cells 1 and 3 on the other track. So I've got those selected, so then I can just keep hitting the what I might do is turn off that. That's I'll turn those off because it's a bit too extreme. So we're just doing the first 5. So obviously as I'm pressing those, so it's keeping 1 and 3 on track A intact and 2 and 4 on track, but otherwise it's just sending random ranges to the others. A bit of swing in there, and then as I say, there's the reset button's mapped to a different MIDI. So if you randomize, reset, randomize. I've just noticed that for some reason the control on my fader fox is set to a toggle, which I'm having to press this twice to send the randomization, but you can figure that out with your own MIDI control. But you can also do, like, you could, let's say we wanted to play all the samples in reverse, and then kind of switch back. So the direction one is the blue fader, and we use the macro fader to kind of like set this to play backwards. So again, because we've only got 2 and 4 and on track A and 1 and 3 on track B, those samples are being played in reverse, and then you can hit reset and reset it again. But also we could do all of them in reverse. So now I've got all the cells selected, and then set volume again. And obviously you're free to kind of like leave that intact, and then maybe we'll change the distortion, overdrive. So to the middle first before I select anything. Pick overdrive and then put some overdrive on it. And then we could maybe change the filter as well. And then we could also put some retriggering and set a range so there's some probability. And again, you could save that as a preset, which I'll come back to, but you can just reset it. So again, you can kind of like keep diving into it and build it up these kind of interesting variations on your loops, and you know, map these controls really good in a live situation. Right, that's all I want to show you on that bit for the time being. Oh, one thing I said before, you can, if you make this work. So I've got a MIDI keyboard connected to channel 1. So what I need to do is change MIDI output to, so I need to change the MIDI output to target Spectrum, doesn't matter which channel, and turn monitoring on, which it is. So I should be getting, which octave is it? Oh no, sorry. Turn that on. No, could just be an octave problem. It's on here somewhere. This is not the best demonstration in the world. Maybe you do ever did it on. Oh. I can't see the MIDI coming through into not the best demonstration in the world. If you know the answer to that, or send it on a postcard to idiots at Spectrum. Well, it's not working. What it could be, I think it may need to be on an instrument track instead. But anyway, what I was going to demonstrate, but I did it very badly, I probably should have practiced beforehand, was the fact that you can, if you have a MIDI keyboard connected, you can play the cells as sort of like drum pads, I guess, and they're mapped to, I think, the track 8, the 8 cells are mapped to the first 8 notes of the, I think it's C4, could be. So C4, C sharp 4, D4, whatever, and then track B is mapped to the octave above that, so it starts at C5. And there's a couple of like you can kind of, I wish I could get that working, damn, because you can play the sequencer and sort of like play cells on over the top or at the same time. Obviously the sequencer will take priority, so it will cut off anything that you play by the keyboard. But something you can do, which is quite a cool trick, is if you so say you had this playing. Oh, I'm disappointed that I couldn't get it working. I think I could easily make it work. Just try making a MIDI track. Let's try dragging. This could break horribly. Try dragging. It's still working then. Okay, yeah. So it is working. So I should be able to now send MIDI to MIDI. So I've got my input coming in. There we go. It works. So yeah, so that's me playing the verse 4 via MIDI. It does respond to velocity, unless you have if you have a setting, if you have a value set in the attenuating slider, then it will always play at a kind of fixed level. Otherwise, it does respond to velocity for the volume. You might also notice that, yeah, that's a good example. So as I press and release that quickly, it's cutting off the. Oh, that's that one. So if I just press and release quickly, it's cutting off the note, and if I hold it, it will play the whole thing. You can change that by obviously that's kind of responding to this setting. So in default mode, it will cut off the note when it receives the note off. But if you turn it to trigger mode, then it will always play to the full extent of the sample. So what I was going to say is you can say where's the snare? Snare on this one. You could drop the snare out of the. I just turned off the play icon there. So then you kind of. So I'm basically really badly playing the snare drum like over the top of the sequencer loop. If you're a better keyboard player than me, then you probably get better results. But yeah, just wanted to show you some interesting things to do there. I just dragged that back into the audio track, mainly because I've got a compressor on there, so you can hear it a bit better. There we go. So I won't go. There's a ton of stuff to do with MIDI in the manual, and there's just too much stuff to go through really. The other thing I did say is that some controls, the individual sliders are not mappable because it's just there's just too many of them. Really, I suppose I could do it at some point, but I haven't so far. But you can map the macro slider if you wanted to use MIDI to change sliders themselves. As I said before, some of the controls, so it's somewhat obvious. I should probably do this. Yes, I will do this. I want to put it back drag it back onto the MIDI track for a second, because like SPECDRUM will operate in a MIDI track or an audio track, so it just depends what you want to do really. But I was trying to thought, MIDI mapping. As I said, some controls are not directly mappable, so you need to put in a where is it? Instrument rack in there, and then put SPECDRUM inside an instrument rack. So what that gives you is the ability to use the macro controls of the instrument rack to map other functions. Because as I'll put the thing in MIDI mapping mode again, you can see like the clock divider and all these things, and the start and end step and the play mode. These are all mappable by MIDI, but you have to do them a different way. So the way you do that would be to let's say drop it into an instrument rack, and if you right click some of these controls, so right click that one, and then you get presented with options to map them to the macro control. So I'm going to map the track A clock divider to control 1, so you can see it's changed that the handy little thing, and I will map the play direction to 2. So again, it says play mode here. Take it out of mapping mode. So as we play, you can change the clock divider. Or you change play mode. And of course, now that you've got the macro controls here, they are MIDI mappable. So this may work or it may not work. So I'm going to put it into mapping mode again. I'm going to click the clock divider and turn the control on my keyboard. Oh, it did work. We've got the clock divider on the MIDI control and the play mode on a MIDI control. So now I should be able to change there we go. That's me changing the clock divider by a MIDI play mode. So yeah, handy little things. And a really handy one is that if you do have a knob mapped to the clock divider, if you turn it all the way to the left, the clock divider turns to 0, which actually stops the track. And you could keep going, so you could put it into MIDI mode again, click the start step, 2, 3, map the end step to 4, and then let's map these to two more MIDI controls. So now we've got control over the So yeah, spend a bit of time and you can sort of like make some pretty creative kind of MIDI mappings for live situations. Or you know, sometimes, I mean, not just live. Sometimes it's good to just experiment with some of this stuff outside the context of the user interface, and you can come up with sort of results that you might not ordinarily get by clicking mouse. So that's that. So yeah, and in a similar way, I won't show you. Will I show you that? Oh yeah, there's some stuff you need to have a read of the manual section for the MIDI mapping, because especially this is the trickier one. I'm not going to try to set it up because I kind of haven't pre-prepared anything, but so I've got some knobs on my fader Fox. So if you put it into MIDI mapping mode and you want to map this fader, you need to make sure it's in the right mode, because it needs to send the right type of value from your MIDI controller. It describes this in the manual. So if you click that and turn 1, it's to do with the absolute mode. I think it's relative signed is the correct mode. Relative signed, yeah. So hopefully this should work. Oh yeah, so turning that knob is set in the upper range, and the bottom one is set in there. It doesn't look like it's working properly. It could be the mode's not quite right. I'll read the manual, because it's like setting up this is a bit fiddly, but it seemed to be the only way I could do it successfully. So and then when you've got it set up, obviously you can sort of like move both. To move the range, you can kind of move like both controls at the same time. Yeah, it isn't quite set up correctly, but that's how you do it anyway. I'm just going to delete these MIDI mappings for the time being, and I'll put Spectrum back into the audio track. Oh no, don't crash. I think live might be about to crash. Yeah, it doesn't look well. Oh no, hang on. Oh, I've lost all my samples. Yeah, sometimes it can be a bit unpredictable. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to load the project back in. One second. So yeah, just go to we'll just do the preset stuff next. Set on. Okay, hopefully that shouldn't be too. I always set the way they're set. Just put some samples back in again. find some easy stuff. 808 kit, I'll do, let's go for that. Kick, rim, clap, tom, hi-hat, 2, that, oops, loop play. Oh. Okay. So, yeah. So presets. So, you may already be familiar with the preset system in live devices, but basically what it is you can store like a snapshot of the device into any one of these 40 slots. 40 is just the number I picked on because it seemed to fit nicely in this little part of the interface. And then what happens then is you can, when you save this device, just a word of warning, like if you kind of create a live project and then drop SPECDRUM into it and then you make the most amazing kind of beats and sequences in the world, and then you save the project but don't save SPECDRUM, you'll lose the settings that you made. So I'd always recommend to the best thing to do is you can save the device here and it will save it in your live presets under SPECDRUM, but also you can just have like 40 snapshots in here of it basically saves everything, so all the sliders and all the select buttons and everything, and then what you can do is from here you can actually export that as a JSON file, so you can load that back in and it kind of loads all the sample assignments and everything as well. So I'll just show how it works. So we've got some stuff in there. So that's your kind of basic drum beat we've got. So actually, I should go through these. So yeah, these are the snapshot cells, and the way you store them is if you shift click to on a cell, it basically stores the snapshot in that cell, and then in order to recall them, you just click any cell that's dark is empty, and anything that contains a snapshot is bright green. So you would just click that, and the currently loaded snapshot appears in yellow. So we've got that one. Now let's say we want to, let's just take that example I did before, and we'll just low pass filter. Oops. Low pass filter the whole thing by using the handy macro controls. So I've got 4 cells selected on both tracks. I've got the yellow filter slider targeted, and I've got cell defeat turned on, so we can set I'll play it so we can hear it. So we've got a low pass version of that. So we might go with that. That's the greatest thing I've ever made. I'm going to save that into another snapshot. So again, find an empty one, or you can overwrite an existing one. But to store the preset, the snapshot, you hold shift and click. So now I've got 2 presets. So then from there, you can just recall those as you want by clicking buttons. There's the original. And the filtered version. Back to the original. Now this begs the question: have I got? These are actually recallable by MIDI as well. I think I've set that up to just drop the octave. This keyboard. Oh, that's amazing! It works. So, if you've got MIDI input going into your track that has Spectrum on it, the first 40 notes, MIDI notes, so starting at 0, which is, I don't know what that is, like C-2 or C-3, that represents the first preset. And then obviously the key above it represents the next one. So you can just press the MIDI keys to recall the preset. And if you go, oh, the greatest thing I could ever make would be to absolutely mess the whole thing up. Do that, and you can set some randomization, and you'd be thinking that's the most amazing preset ever. So I'll save that, and then you could keep creating like that. Save as a preset, and then just recall these as you want. So back to the original. And it isn't just the sliders that is saved, as I said. You can change the sequencer, and you could, let's do that for example. Maybe put on some distortion. And yeah, that's an amazing preset. I'll save that. And then when you're bored of that, you can just press a MIDI key or click any of these to change back to another preset. And as I said earlier, obviously you could record the preset changes via MIDI onto a MIDI track, so you could have a MIDI track playback alongside Spectrum, and kind of you could almost make it into a song mode, I guess, by changing the presets. So that's the preset stuff. The only thing I haven't shown you is, well, first of all, the control on the right actually will erase all of the presets that you've currently got. The other two controls, the kind of like little arrow upwards, that is to load a preset file. So you click that, and it will look for. And it defaults to looking in the Spectrum folder wherever you install Spectrum, but you can kind of save these anywhere on your computer. Well, you definitely can on the Mac anyway. The other button is the opposite of that. It's just save. So I'll just show you. So we've got some presets here. So what we're going to do is just save these as demo presets. So if I want to delete, let me just find, give me 1 second. just find Spectrum on my system. That's Spectrum. Yep. So I say I'm just going to delete Spectrum from that track, and then I'm going to load it back in. But obviously, when we load it back into Live, it will load as an empty setup again. It just takes a couple of seconds. So yeah, there we go. So we've loaded Spectrum back in, but it's completely empty. So I said before, the handy thing about this preset snapshot system is that it will actually it stores the entire thing. So that includes all the faders, sliders, and all the sample assignments. So I'm going to click the left button to load it, and there is our demo presets. Open that file. Oh yeah, the weird one. This is actually in the code, but I made it like it's supposed to recall the first preset when you load a file that way, but for some reason it doesn't always work. I've not got to the bottom of that yet. But in any case, once you load the preset, then they're all here. So if you click the first one, and there's your original drum beat, and all the others are also there. And obviously you can still recall them via MIDI. As I said before, clicking the right button will just clear all your presets. And that is that, I think. So yeah, this preset system is in the version 1.1, which will be going out definitely this week. So watch out for that coming up. The other thing, there's sort of a tricky decision that I've had to make. When I originally released Spectrum, it was one of those things where I wasn't sure what to charge for it, and took some advice from a few people whose opinions I kind of respect, and they said, it should be at least $25 or something, and which I thought was not that I don't think I put the work in to justify that, but that's on the expensive side for what is essentially kind of a niche creative device, really. Anyway, put it out $25, €25, I should say. But I don't think it's reaching as many people as it could. I think it's the price is putting people off purchasing it. So with the release of 1.1, I'm going to change the pricing structure so that it's going to be have a minimum price of €10. But I'll make it so that you can, if you feel generous and you feel you want to pay a bit more for it, then you can do that via the Gumroad shop. Which then leaves me with a tricky thing to deal with, and that is people that have already bought it at full price. Now, what I'm going to do is, once I change the pricing structure for the 1.1 release, if anybody feels kind of aggrieved that they paid full price for it, just email me and I'll see what I can do. That is it. I think I need a rest from making videos. My voice is barely hanging together for this one. But thanks for watching. Thanks to everybody who have bought Spectrum so far, and thanks for your support. It really means a lot. It's definitely given me the ability and the motivation to carry on and make some more devices, which I have a ton of ideas coming up, various things. So, yep, stay tuned.